Muhammad rules, but Christ is king. So, I just want to start out today with a quick news article. It is from, I'm not sure exactly who reported on it first, Axios or somebody, but Muhammad is now the most popular name for boys in Britain. And this is very interesting because on the girl side, it's not, to be fair, but it is on the boy side, and that's mainly because Muhammad is just a far more a common name for boys, right, who are Muslim rather than girls. But this points to an overarching problem, especially in Great Britain, where you have a massive amount of immigration that is going to outpace, it's already outpacing birth rates of English citizens. So yeah, you can see second place was Noah, which is Noah an English name? Like what? Noah, I guess
I
Jewish,
don't know.
Right? Or Hebrew?
It's got to be. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm surprised by that. Actually, Cody, I'll probably have you throw up the graphic here, but then you have Olivia being number one for girls. I don't see any. Do you see any kind of, what would I call it, Islamic names for girls there? I don't.
No.
Huh.
They look very English.
So they get creative. They get creative on the girl side. The guys is like, nah, bro, you're Muhammad. You are Muhammad. But anyway, that was a very interesting breaking story. I wanted to start out today with just some highlights from the news this week. So, Biden pardons Hunter Biden. President Biden pardons his son, and this is in lieu of him claiming he would not do this. And he had said it many, many times. His quote was, "Nobody's above the law, and he will respect the decision of the jury." This doesn't end up happening. I do, however, I want to kind of get your opinion on it, Cody, but my personal opinion is I would do it for my son, right? I do understand the main concept of it, which is, hey, this is my son. I'm going to end up pardoning him. The thing is that it does just goes against what he was already saying, so it's kind of not a truthful past 6 months for Biden on his track record. But here nor there, Hunter Biden is pardoned for 11 years, for the past 11 years, which is an oddly specific number. Just going to be real, right? If you said decade, it would be like, okay, you're really covering your P's and Q's. But it was 11 years. So I really want to know what happened to that 11th and 10th year, or 10 years and 5 months. What happened there? But it also pardons him from crimes that he did and may have committed. So it just goes in the pass. So no matter what he did, he killed somebody, threw him in a ditch. All right, he's good. He's pardoned federally, which is really, really wild. I didn't even know you could pardon. How can you pardon for things that are that you don't know happened? I want a pardon like that. That's awesome.
Are you admitting to something, Caleb?
No, I might need one. After. Also,
after this podcast.
Yeah, after this podcast,
we
actually have some interesting news that came in regarding our podcast, which is not yet started. You know, we haven't put out a ton of content yet on Instagram or any of these platforms. So I made the Instagram account a couple weeks ago. We've already been suspended, and I assume that that's just because of the username, the last Nationalist. That's wild.
Yeah, I was actually. It's pretty wild because I was trying to, get our graphics on there, whatnot, get our logos and whatnot, and so I'm like logging into all the different accounts, your Spotify, or YouTube, and I went to Instagram and I, put in our login information and it said your account's suspended. And I was like, already? So I had to start the appeal process. Luckily, we got it back, but hey,
we haven't even posted yet.
No.
Imagine when they see what we post.
So make sure to
Muhammad rules, but Christ is king. You can't say.
Oh no! Shut down! Shut down!
It's gone.
We're gonna need that pardon.
You cannot say Christ is king in today's America. No, we can. We'll get canceled. Who cares? Christ is king. It's what it is. Candace Owens, to be fair, she does say that a lot.
She does say that a lot.
She says that a lot.
But with that being said, everybody make sure to check us out on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. While we're still there, X. We're going to be on all the platforms.
We'll be on Rumble.
But, prioritizing YouTube because we really want to get the video format of this out. And you're right. We're going to be on Rumble.
We'll be on Rumble.
So
We're gonna
be
be
on
on
all of them.
Yeah, we're gonna be on some platforms that we can't get canceled on, which is cool. We also kind of wanted to highlight a few more corrupt things that have been happening in the government. Mitch McConnell and his wife. So his wife, was she actually a Chinese national before, or is she just Chinese ethnicity?
So I believe, to answer your question, the short answer is no. She is an American.
Citizen. Okay.
She is an
Good.
American citizen. Her parents migrated here, I believe, in 41,
Okay. Okay.
if I'm not
A
mistaken.
minute.
Her dad was the one that started, I think it's called Foremost Shipping Company.
Okay.
And supposedly the Chinese government owes them millions of dollars.
A lot of money.
Like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
So
Well, and I know that the McConnells have invested heavily in this. So this is just, it's a highlight moment where Mitch McConnell and our representatives, I mean, he was majority leader for how long? And he has foreign interests in a nation in which we are in direct conflict with. I mean, this is something that even the Biden administration now admits, right? They had Trump's tariffs. Trump's tariffs are so terrible, yet they leave the tariffs on. They continue Trump's policies of really being hostile towards China. Biden then extends it. He even expands the tariffs, now saying if you are an American citizen or if you work for any American company, if you work in any of, he defined about 5 different sectors, which really were around microchips, you will be subject to treason, and I forget what the other charge was, but either way, you're going to be subject to treason. You're going to be federally prosecuted if you do not close up shop. So you either have to leave China, you have to stop working for those companies that are tied to China, and yeah, and that if you're in those sectors, which is really, really interesting because tariffs are one thing, but now he's going after the intellectual manpower, right? Which I think is, I mean, how many more steps do you have, right? You're going after economically, now you're going after the intellectual property. Now what do we do? And, I'd be very interested to see what happens with Taiwan over the next couple years. But we also had this whole Chinese influence thing is very interesting to me because we've seen that from many, many other, how do I say it? Big representatives of the United States, or at least government officials. So Dianne Feinstein's old staffer, she was a Chinese involved. She was a Chinese asset, and she was sending a bunch of stuff back to Beijing. And the FBI informs Feinstein, and she goes, "Oh no, I guess we better shut that down." So it's just pretty wild to me how you can have so many Chinese nationals and Chinese interests all around and inside Washington, D.C., and yet nobody really blinks an eye. Nobody bats an eye. You have on all sides. It's not just Republican or Democrat. And that's kind of one thing that I like to mention a lot is that this isn't a partisan thing. This isn't, the Democrats are on the Chinese side. No, the old establishment Republicans are also on they're on the opponent's side. And the opponent being the American people, the American taxpayer. That's who they're in opposition to. They're not in opposition to the American establishment because the American establishment serves itself. And that's the problem, is that they sell the nation to profit themselves a little bit, right? They obviously aren't making hundreds of billions of dollars, but they'll sacrifice hundreds of billions of dollars of our taxpayer money, of our leverage, of our buying power to promote their own businesses and to get those tens of millions, those hundreds of millions. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is worth how much money, Cody? It's just insane. She's worth so much money.
400 million or something like that.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
And just absolutely crazy. And I see you're pulling up the Chinese council member there in San Francisco. She's a council member, but she's Chinese. She doesn't even speak English. Is that correct?
That is what I'm trying to find. I can't see a direct article here, but I believe it was the L.A. City Council.
Oh my
I believe
goodness.
it was. And she gave her whatever the address is when she got nominated. It's not an inauguration,
Yeah,
but of that
yeah.
sort. And
It was in
she
Chinese.
gave it in Mandarin.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Mandarin. I think we're getting banned. I'm
you
sorry,
just
guys.
did a racism.
I did erase. It's over. I'm so sorry. I said Chinese and not Mandarin. It's over. It was a good run.
But yeah, it's just wild to me that yes, it's not a federal position, but still, it's Oh, San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco. I mean,
Very interesting
it's just
here.
really wild. Uh, it to me is like, hey, if you can't speak English, I don't know if you should be representing the inner city that speaks English to the 90th percent. Or okay, maybe a good percentage of them speak Spanish, but they sure as heck don't speak Mandarin. So it just doesn't make sense. The whole concept of republic and a democracy is that your government represents you.
Yeah.
How does this represent you?
Yeah, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It's they're saying here, going back to the lady, it's San Francisco City Council, and the Elections Commission member is a legal non-citizen.
Oh my goodness. So she's not even a citizen.
Nope.
She's not a citizen of the United States of America.
She does not hold.
Oh my gosh.
She holds a U.S. visa.
Ah, okay. You get that visa.
So
Some Chinese asset.
she's not a legal alien.
Granted it.
Okay.
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 Oh,
But
that's cool.
she is not an American citizen.
But she's probably a Chinese asset. I mean, the fact that they're getting Chinese assets in all these, senators and House representatives, staffers, and I mean, you could even have Tim Walz had an affair with a Chinese national. I believe it was an actual agent. No.
A male?
Tampon Tim. That's what it is.
Yeah, I don't. That guy.
Oh, what a
How did he
weirdo.
win? How did he win something?
How did he?
How did he become governor?
How did Kamala Harris?
Well, we know how.
A DEI hire.
I mean, because she didn't win the popular vote. I mean,
She didn't win one representative. She didn't win one vote as far as like
leading up to the DNC
in the primary.
Yeah.
So the way that the primary works at the DNC is that everybody runs and you get delegates based on how many votes you get, right? So she didn't even qualify for a single delegate. I mean, you know how unpopular you have to be comparative to your peers? I mean, even if you ran Bernie, okay, I definitely am against his socialist policies, but at least he actually got a movement behind him naturally. It wasn't really pushed by the media. It wasn't something that was completely fabricated by the establishment. No. And that's something that I actually respect liberal populists on, is that they at least stick to their guns when it comes to these types of things, true populists, and they won't support. For instance, me, I would never support Mitch McConnell. If Mitch McConnell comes in against a Democrat, there is no ounce of my body that wants to support him over somebody else, even if they're a Democrat. I have no allegiance to him. I do not want to put my name on. So, Mitch McConnell, also an interesting fact, his campaign received over $1 million from his extended family, the Chinese nationals. What is happening? What is happening right now? Over $1 million. So, I mean, you know how this works. Dan Crenshaw, by the way, claims that special interests have no sway. They have no sway. So if you give a politician a $5 million check, you in no way have any sway over them, which is delusion, total delusion. But yet, most of us admit that. Liberal, conservative, 80% of us will say, hey, yes, campaign contributions, there is a large amount of sway that the donors have. But yet a senator, a Republican senator, can be given money by the Chinese, by a Chinese company, an extended family. I mean, we know how China works, right? Like the Chinese Communist Party integrates into every company and it controls it. How in the world is a senator even allowed to take that money? Not only that, how is he not brought into question by the other senators? That shows you how dirty they all are, right? Nobody's going to actually expose this because they're doing 2 or 3 things just like it, right? Oh, I'm bought off by the Russians. Oh, I'm bought off by the French. I'm bought off by all these different special interests who are not in the will of the American people. I mean, it's gone past just corporations. It's going to now foreign nations. I mean, you can look at, whether it's APAC, whether it's, foreign interests from oil, Saudi oil money. I mean, everybody has their hand in the pie except American citizens, right? We're the only ones who don't have say and don't have sway over what's done with our government. And I always hear this from, Americans and people that I talk to is like, yeah, the government that just doesn't serve the needs of the people, right? And everybody's kind of surprised by that because we're supposed to be a republic. We go out and vote. It's a form of democracy. Obviously not a pure democracy. I'm not arguing that. But the problem is and we shouldn't be surprised that obviously they don't serve the American people because they have special interests. Their interests and their donors and their controllers are not American, and they certainly aren't the American people at large. So a lot of reforms have to happen in that sector. It's really really wild. But I think that kind of covers our highlights as far as corruption. I could go on for days, but Cody, do you have anything in particular to add to this Chinese debacle?
Not really, but just a little bit more on the Chow. It's interesting because the New York Times did a investigation into her back in 2019. Found a lot of corruption while she was Trump's Secretary of Transportation. Kind of like she was using her own staffers to do personal matters for her.
Surprise. Surprise.
She apparently brought her dad, their headquarters, where it's in the States, had her staffers like facilitate an interview with a Chinese television network in Mandarin, and basically the television show was propping him up as like a pro-Chinese shipping company kind of deal. So and like she had her staffers help with that interview. Kind of wild stuff, but anyway,
isn't this?
It's so weird.
Real quick, look up the definition of treason. Let's just look it up.
Let's look it up.
We're not throwing it out there. We would never say that our leadership is treasonous. Would never. I would never say such a thing. But let's look up the definition.
The betrayal of allegiance toward one's own country, especially by committing hostile acts against it or aiding its enemies in committing such acts.
Sorry, Mitch, but you gotta go. Sorry, kid. We should give him an option. We could deport him.
It's treason for Mitch, but not his woman, because she's helping out.
Are you questioning her allegiance to this country?
But she's Chinese.
Well, I'm kind of
okay. She is an American citizen.
She's an American citizen.
But it's a little suspect.
But the Chinese family funds the Mitch McConnell campaign. They
literally have a close relationship with a former Chinese president.
It's just insane.
So
the Chinese Communist Party, it's not like they're not all interconnected. It works as an apparatus. It's just insane.
They're smart little buggers.
And I went over this before with the World Bank, and how China really takes advantage of those things where they don't even want to be considered a developed country. That way they can take the grants as a developing nation, but while we fund it. So we fund it, we give them the money, they get the grant, and then they have their workers fill the grant, so they get 100% of the money.
I feel like if you have nukes, you shouldn't have an opportunity to say that you're a developing country.
I like that.
I mean,
if you're putting money towards a nuclear program, I think you're okay. I think you're fine. I think you're fine. I don't think like Costa Rica is looking at making freaking nuclear warheads. Freaking Costa Ricans get ICBMs. We got problems. But cut them off. But I mean, I'm genuinely, I make fun, and I am picking on the Chinese, and it's easy to do. Because they do have a lot of sway in the international community, and they have a lot of sway over politicians. That's why. And one of the biggest boogeyman that people point out is Russia. And the main reason for that is they're easy to hate because they don't really have a lot of sway over politics in America. They don't have a lot of sway over the international relations and the UN and all these other things. But the Chinese do, right? So really you have the U.S. and the Chinese interests that really sway global politics. So that's kind of why you see a lot of the American media and a lot of American companies not wanting to go against the Chinese. And same thing with movies, in America. The Chinese, they require, they only approve between, I think, 24 and 35 movies a year from the American market. Same thing. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not trashing. No, Hollywood should be, but yeah, it's very interesting how they try to check all the boxes because we have to get approved by the Chinese Communist Party, and it's just really wild. But we'll see what happens. I'm really hopeful. I think a lot of people are waking up, especially in the American right, I would say, because this whole concept of saying Christ is king, being anti-Semitic, and this whole concept of declaring Christ as being your savior. Okay, and being king of the universe, that's anti-Semitic now? I mean, that to me is pretty wild. And that brings me into the next part, which is UN sway over university campuses. And Cody, if you could look up just a couple of things on this, essentially I'll kind of explain what, in a very brief terms, what's kind of going on. So the UN, essentially what was happening is liberals were protesting the Gazan war, which I understand both sides of the argument. I don't want to get into it now. We'll have a whole segment on that. We'll really dive into that. But I totally get both sides of it. It's a very, very difficult conflict where the Israelis are definitely under attack consistently, while the Gazans and the West people in the West Bank are also under attack pretty consistently. And then everyone's shocked that they're attacking each other, but they've been in a consistent war for the past since Israel's inception, and everybody's shocked that they're fighting. It's like, okay, that's typically what you do in a war. You know, to me, it just doesn't make sense. Why anybody's surprised on either side, you know? And the Israelis are like, can you believe that they would do this to us? It's like, yeah, the Irish did it for how long when the British were trying to occupy? It's what happens. But, you know, same thing from, you know, the Palestinian side in the West Bank side, which is like, they're trying to grab land. It's like, yeah, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to subdue the area. I mean, if both sides can't admit to either one of these things, I'm sorry, but you're missing the mark, and you're just gonna keep going around in circles. But anyway, the mass protests happen on university campuses, and what happens is you see like the Harvard, I think the president of Harvard resigns. You have a bunch of universities really getting put under pressure by Israeli donors and Jewish donors, really saying, hey, you're going to have to regulate speech on campuses because we don't want X, Y, and Z being said and being promoted. Which, to be fair, you know, they provide a couple examples. I totally get it, right? I mean, some of the stuff's pretty wild. However, the UN can really, this is crazy to me. They actually, Cody, give us a little details here, but essentially they have like peacekeepers, I think is what they're called. Am I right? Where they can deploy to university campuses and basically say, hey, we want this NGO, this non-government organization, to determine whether what's being said is anti-Semitic, right? And they will be allowed to then get these kids in trouble. Not Americans, by the way. These people coming here and determining whether what they're saying is anti-Semitic or not, and giving them punishments based on whatever they think should be done. So is that a good?
I would like
synopsis?
to do some more research, and actually do like a whole segment kind of on this.
Okay.
And the ethicality, if that's a word, ethicalness of the UN peacekeepers in general.
Yeah.
I think it would be a cool segment to really dive into where we can really do our research. Based off, I can't see any like actual news articles reporting this. I'm not sure really why they would necessarily. There was supposedly a viral social media post that went, viral back in May that did suggest this stuff.
I don't believe it's UN. I believe it's NGOs, and I could be wrong.
Okay, well, yeah, like I said, I'd like to do some research, but I think just that whole thing in general, there is a lot of talk of potentially passing legislation here in the U.S. Against quote-unquote hate speech, and what does that entail? And it was kind of a very loose terminology on the term hate speech.
Which is breaking the First Amendment.
Yeah.
It's 100% breaking the First Amendment. I do not care what anybody says. Kristi Noem, go screw yourself. Like, I mean, genuinely, you cannot claim that you're an American citizen, but you can't say X, Y, and Z because, well, we're powerful and we can write a law. Like, no.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that a lot of these old establishment Republicans, and Kristi Noem, I mean, she's kind of starting to align herself with that. I believe that she does not have the best interest of the American people in mind when it comes to a lot of these things, because she's doing what her donors say. If she has a lot of Israeli and Jewish donors, they're going to tell her what to do. It's just what it is. I mean, it's not rocket science, people. Like, I mean, whoever writes your checks, you're going to do what they say. That's how it is. So Kristi Noem is talking about, the possibility of really enforcing those types of things across the United States. And I assume the first step will be on social media. Wildness. And we'll eventually, I think next time we'll actually go over the censorship on social media. But, in Britain and all these things. But we'll cross that bridge. I think that was a good current events and corruption segment. and kind of really put it all together. But one thing, but before we really, because the main goal of this podcast, like I said, is to put the American people's interests at the front of the line. And the concept is, hey, there's way too many foreign and corporate interests at play, and that's really shaping our policy. It's shaping our spending bills. It's shaping what we are. I was at Sheetz the other day, and there was a homeless guy outside. He was a vet. Well, that's the first thing I asked. So I always go up to them and I ask, like, hey, are you a vet? And the one guy wasn't. He's probably just a meth head, a meth addict, but it's what it is. But the other guy was, guess what? He was the quiet guy. He was just kind of sitting there. And, when I asked if they wanted something, the one guy is like, oh, yeah, I'll take X, Y, and Z. And guess what? The vet sat there completely quiet. He was not wanting to engage. He was he's just a genuinely good guy. You could just tell. And it's just really sad. This is a guy who served our country. I was kind of asking him, and he was telling me about his operations that he did in the military. And, it's so horrific. To me, it's treason that the American government funds the World Bank before it funds housing for vets. And I understand that everybody says, oh, it's not the government's responsibility to house people. Well, guess what? They went and fought the wars that you guys perpetrated. That you guys perpetrated to make tons of money for your defense contractors. That's who made the money. Don't be playing all dumb now. Like, you guys fought the war. You got the funding. You pushed these wars. You made these wars. Most of these wars did not have to happen. They were pushed by special interests from defense contracts to Israel to all these other countries. And now you have a massive homeless issue because the vets have been completely abandoned. It's just one of the worst things I've ever seen. These poor vets are all over the streets. They're homeless. They're going hungry. The guy didn't have a cell phone number. I gave him my cell phone number. I'm like, hey man, if you ever get to a phone, right? If you ever need anything, give me a call. It's just crazy. This is insanity. And I went outside to, I went inside because I was getting them stuff, and I asked the one Sheetz employee, I was like, oh yeah, the homeless guys out there, do they come by pretty often? And she was like, oh no, are they bothering you? I was like, no. I'm initiating with them. Like, don't kick them off. And she was just like, yeah, she's like, they come around every so often. I was like, vets, and she just kind of nodded, and it's like, oh my gosh. And apparently they chase them off every so often. And I'm just like, please don't do that. But to me, it's just it is the most poignant, it's the most, I would say, obvious example of treason from our government, that they would fund all these foreign things before housing our vets.